One of the best things about computers is that they don't get bored executing repetitive tasks, and they can execute algorithms very quickly with a seemingly infinite amount of data points. So, how does all of this relate to automation? Well, automation is built on algorithms. The algorithm is the holder of the logic behind the automation. It's the holder of the sequence and steps and evaluations you want to take place. The next thing is the programming language. Now, you don't hear as much about programming languages as you do about algorithms, but they're also an important tool in your automation tool belt. So, if an algorithm is a reproducible set of steps to solve a problem, programming is the art of conveying these steps to a computer in a way that the computer can understand and execute. So one of the reasons I asked you on the podcast, we've been talking about kind of the importance of creativity in IT, and that IT is kind of an inherently creative endeavor. But a lot of times it's not seen as that. So you are one of the best people I've ever met at making an environment conducive to creativity. So what are the key elements that you do to make an environment creative based on your experience? What makes an environment conducive to creativity?
Yeah, I would say there are a few different tenets that I try to cling to in terms of creating a safe space for creativity. The first is putting the work first. As you can imagine, in the arts and anywhere in business, there can be a lot of ego. And my favorite experiences were always when the designers and the cast and the crew on something were on board because they loved the play or the film or the project, whatever the piece was that they were trying to communicate. So when everyone believes in the work and the importance of the work, and you put that first, then competition between the collaborators kind of fades, and ego fades, and it becomes this sort of all hands on deck energy. There's this sort of natural order that evolves in the chaos to create something new. And, people's fears or insecurities start to die down a little bit. It just evaporates. And I think putting the piece you're working on, whether that's, a podcast series or a blog or even, script for code, that is the cure-all, I think, for creative and problem-solving insecurity.
Communication is key. Now, in IT, we can simplify communication down to two types of communication. There's a IT to IT communication and IT to non-IT. So in a little bit, we'll talk about IT to IT communications, but for now, let's focus on communications between IT and non-IT. So with that, always assume positive intent from others and push positive intent when problem solving. Enable your end users, learn about people, what they do, what they need, and how you can solve their problems. And then find influencers. So we're going to start with assuming positive intent. This is critically important to our IT. Maybe someone accidentally deleted something or broke something. Most likely it was because they were trying to do their job. It was probably an accident. They're embarrassed that it happened and they're not actively out to get you. Now, with cybersecurity, it doesn't really work to assume positive intent from everyone, but when working with coworkers' problems, probably best to assume positive intent. Now, when you're solving a problem or a system is down, a little bit of communication goes a long way to pushing positive intent within the problem-solving process. So here's what you can do. Let them know what you're doing, let them know why you're doing it, and then let them know when you're doing it and how long it might take. There's a term in psychology called code switching, and that means switching the way you speak depending on who you're speaking to. You wouldn't explain the most deeply technical concepts to a 6-year-old, and honestly, we don't want to hear the nuanced details of accounting in the accounting department explained to us. So know your audience, saying, hey, there's a setting that gets flipped in the software sometimes. We're still working to figure out why, but this should fix it for the time being. Sounds a lot better to non-IT people than, well, there's a bug in the software that flips a registry key to an undesirable state, and then the software stops functioning correctly. We're not sure why at this time. Our intermediary fix is to set the registry value, and maybe 1 to 2 cycles will have this fixed. So next question, do you see any common misconceptions or mistakes that people make within their IT job search or during the interview process?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is just assuming that the past predicts the future. And this is so hard because we all know how much the field changes, but you get head down in a job for 4, 5, 6 years, and then you come up for air and it feels like, all of my skills are still relatively relevant. I should be able to go out there and find another role doing more or less, what I'm doing today, even if the window dressing around it has changed a bit. But I think what a lot of folks find when they get back on the job market is it's not so much that individual skills they have aren't relevant as it is their entire field has changed beyond recognition, right? I mean, I remember, 10 years ago, I was doing deployments for bare metal SQL servers. And, there's still companies that do that today, but the field has completely moved on. Databases are managed in a way they weren't 10 years ago. And if they're not being managed, they're in these very bespoke environments where, you need to have a lot of really domain specific expertise to be successful there. And so I can't just walk around and say, oh yeah, I'm a SQL Server DBA and expect that to unlock doors for me because the budget's not there, right? The hiring's not there. I think a lot of the time what IT folks miss and where they struggle when they get into an interview is they assume that, the market forces should reward them just for showing up and having technical skills. Mm-hmm. That is not true. You have to be more savvy with how you understand the market itself. There are very specific areas where IT teams are investing. There are very specific areas where software engineering managers are willing to purchase tools. And if your expertise lines up with those, great. You're going to have, a lot of job opportunities available to you. If they don't, you're going to have to not even necessarily tweak your skills. You're going to have to tweak your self-perception of who you are. So this gets to something very existential about us. And I think that's tough for people when they get back on the job market.
Take the time, look at problems around you, write down the logical flow of solving that problem. Step 2 is learning and understanding Boolean logic. So this may sound difficult, but I promise you it's not. So we'll throw a couple of resources in the show notes for further reading, but here's a crash course. So binary is a different way of counting. So it's how computers operate. Binary has 2 numbers, 0 and 1. This is known as a base 2 number system. In humans, we typically use a base 10 number system for most things, which means we have 10 numbers to choose from to make up all the rest of the numbers, 0 through 9. We also often switch number systems, sometimes without even realizing it. So time is a modified version of a base 60 number system. So you have 0 through 60 as your seconds, minutes, hours. But I digress. Binary, 1 and 0. Much like every number we use can be made up of the numbers 0 through 9. Binary can make all the numbers using 0 and 1. The combination of these 2 numbers makes up all of the digital data in the world. Then applying binary to logic is known as Boolean logic. Boolean logic is named after the mathematician George Boole, who came up with theories regarding Boolean logic and Boolean algebra in the late 1840s. So Boolean logic states that there are 2 states, true or false, 1 or 0. George Boole, you might say, wasn't a really big fan of gray areas, but since computers view everything as 1 or a 0, true or false, to effectively solve problems with computers, that's how we need to think also. Okay, so logic. At its most simplified form, Boolean logic is a set of tests for an input to help get a desired output. These can be added to your if-then statements. So the 3 most basic functions that we need to be familiar with are and, or, and not. So and is if all the specified conditions are met, the output is true. So for example, if motion is detected in my room and it's before midnight and after 7 a.m., turn on my lamp. Or if at least one of the specified conditions is met, the output is true. So we can stack these. So we'll have that and statement and we'll say or the lamp button is pushed, turn on my lamp. And then there's not. If conditions are not met, the output is true. So for example, if motion has not been detected for 15 minutes, turn off the lamp. So if there's no motion, turn off the lamp. So with these 3 functions, they can be mixed and matched and put together to get just about any desired state you need.